Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to another great game from the TCEC Season 15 Super Final between the two top engines Leela C and Stockfish. Today I wanted to show you the game from round 38 and although as I mentioned in my previous video the Season 15 is finished, I'm going to continue to analyze these great games because today I wanted to show you really 100 perfect moves by Leela C. It's unbelievable how Leela C crushes Stockfish now in the continuation of this series. Stockfish is really helpless in the continuation of this very nice super final, and Leela C is really unbeatable. So don't forget, during the July, the TCEC Season 16 will start with some more top engine games, and I'm really looking forward to watch the games because, as I always love to say, these great games they help me in order to get the best lines, in order to get a better understanding of some particular openings and of some particular sidelines of openings. So I was really when I was analyzing, I was also excited about this English opening. I wanted first to see Stockfish's response on this English opening. We had sort of a King's Indian setup, and I like to play the King's Indian myself, so I wanted to see what are the ideas for black and white in this English opening, because I had my troubles while playing against the English opening, so that was really a great game for me to analyze. So let's see now what happened in the game, and this really perfect 100 moves of Leela C. So we have the c4 by Leela, and here e5 by Stockfish. So the English opening, knight on c3, immediately taking control of the d5 square. Here we have d6, and this is now already sort of a showing cards move, because as you can see, of course, these three pawns here are directing on the king side, so that's why Stockfish will probably coordinate the attack on the king side. Here Leela C, after potential d3 move, will have three connected pawns in the center. They were aiming on the queen side, so that's why Leela C is aiming on the queen side with this attack. So g3 also a common idea. We're playing sort of a reversed Sicilian here. f5 played by Stockfish, which is of course also great move, because after knight on f6 we are having also a very powerful control of the e4 square in the center. So bishop on g2, knight on f6, and now comes this move d3. So as said, here is the direction of the attack of Leela C. Here we have the direction of the attack of Stockfish. g6, which leaves now a very flexible pawn structure here for Stockfish. So many mobile pawn structures can happen in the continuation of the game. Here knight on f3, and now bishop on g7. Here this e4 move can be a big mistake for those who have maybe troubles to play as black. Here e4 is really losing immediately, because here we can simply take d takes e4, and here we'll attack this pawn three times, and this pawn is undefendable. So that's why bishop on g7, simply continuing castling and castling. So still common theory, we are really in this common English opening setup with this reverse Sicilian, and you see now white's idea is probably to play the move rook on b1 and create pawn breakthrough and the pawn attack here on the queen side. Black's advance is a little bit slower, because after potential h6 and g5, well, there is always this problem with this weak f5 pawn, and we can always challenge these pawns although they're connected. So it leaves also some spaces around the king, so black's position is a little bit more danger to create an immediate pawn breakthrough. It has to be maybe a central counter attack with moves as rook on e8 is maybe one of the best ways to create counterplay against this early flank attack. Here, as I said, rook on b1 with the preparation for an early flank attack, and now knight on c6. If you play a5, I like this a5 more than this knight on c6. I like to play move this a5 against this English opening because it slows down a little bit white's attack. White needs to move at least here this a3 pawn in order to get attack and to get a fast attack on the queen side. So here with the knight on c6, which is also a very tricky idea here by Stockfish. Stockfish allows here the b4 move, but with this a5 move you have weakened a little bit your pawn structure here with this three connected pawns. So okay, it's also very great idea because now we are allowing also this b5 move, but we will not further weaken the pawn structure on the queen side. We are a little bit patient here and we'll try to create a counter attack on the queen side or with some center pawn breakthrough. So here h6, here Stockfish prepares this potential g5 move, which will also be dangerous for white because sometimes the knight on f3 can be attacked and you can get many tempos. b5, of course, the idea here by Lela, and now we have knight on e7, and now comes a very good move by Leela C0, e4, and you see now the problems. If you play something like f4, it seems that you can play here g takes f4, and after e takes f4, bishop takes on f4 would be really a mistake because you have knight on e4, and this f4 can sometimes be tricky. Here, of course, if you take the knight, then you lose the bishop here on f4. So that's why you'll be forced, maybe after this potential continuation of f4, you may play here the move d4. But this position gets really unclear after potential g5 move. You can play maybe something like h3, but still, if we get this knight on, if we get this pawn on g5 protected, then a potential h5 and g4 pawn breakthrough is really dangerous. So you see, white has weakened the king side too much, I think, in front of the king, so it will be playable, really playable game here for black. So after e4, here Stockfish makes maybe a slight inaccuracy with the move a6, not proceeding with this f4 move, and here Leela C0 immediately undermines this huge pawn majority on the king side. If you take with the g pawn, then I think after b takes a6 here and the rook takes on a6, knight on h4 is really good because this knight is now fixed. It cannot be attacked by a minor piece, by the bishop or by a knight. It's also very well fixed, and here we can undermine this black's attack on the king side with the potential f4 move. So this will be the defensive idea for white against this setup. So that's why here knight on f5 was played by Stockfish, and here we have a4 by Leela C0. We want to stay on our space advantage on the queen side. We have also occupied the 5th rank, the other side of the board, so it's really a supporting attack here move. And a takes b5 was played, common idea. We have a takes b5 and now bishop on e6, rook on e1. This is very good because now there are many pawn moves in the center. There are possible pawn moves in the center, so that's why you should have a really compact position with your rooks, with your knights, with your pieces, because if your pieces get a little bit too loose on in the center, there are really some nasty tactics possible here with some pawn breakthroughs, and you want to have the center occupied at least with your pieces here. So here bishop on b2, if you play something like this, I don't think that bring you so much, because here we can maybe stop the attack or even try some potential d5 pawn breakthroughs. Still flexible game, but here you see black has also occupied this a file. So bishop on b2 I think is a little bit too slow. Here rook on e1, a very nice and progressive move here for white to continue with a compact position, and here knight on d7 was played. Now comes a very nice reposition of the knight on d2, because we want to occupy these weak squares in the center with our knights or with the bishops if the position allows it. You have to calculate, but it comes also with a direct attack on this pawn on b7, so that's why knight on c5. Here we have knight on e4, challenging the knight, of course. If you try something like c6, that's a bad move, because here we can simply take b takes c6, b takes c6, knight on c5, d takes c5, and we can in the next move take this pawn on c6. So that's why here after knight from d to e4, the position for the bishop is again closed, so that's why here Stockfish plays again with the knight on the same square on d7, waiting a little bit, and here Stockfish wants to see what Lela would do in the continuation. Knight on d5 was played by Leela C. It's really an interesting idea, because it's creating a little bit static position here on the queen side, because we have coordinated our attack on the queen side. But here after bishop takes on d5, c takes d5, it's really a brave decision, because basically what we can do is just maybe to create some attacks on the c file. So here knight on b6 was played. Maybe b6 would be an interesting idea, because then we can try maybe to fix the position on the queen side with knight on c5 ideas, really create staticity in the game, and try some kind of a pawn breakthroughs here, maybe on the king side, and or maybe some reposition of pieces. But here knight on b6 was played with a direct attack on this knight, and here Leela C. played a really tricky move, bishop on e3. If you take here immediately knight on d5, then you get queen on b3 with a direct attack on the knight. We have some pinning situations here on the king. If you try something like c6, then knight on c3 is really dangerous. Here if after maybe knight takes on e3, we have rook takes on e3, king on h7, and now knight on d5, c takes d5, and now queen on d5. This will be a very weak pawn. You're basically forced to bring the rook now on the b file, and still this will be a weakness. If you try something like, of course, b6 will immediately take and will win the exchange. But the more the problem also for black in this position is, if you still hang on to this b7 pawn, then bishop on e4 is really powerful, and this pawn on g6 would be really a weakness through the whole game. This black's bishop on g7 would be paralyzed, because the bishop is blocked down by its own pawns, and still, as I said, with some h4 h5 ideas, it will be really dangerous here. So that's why after bishop on e3, queen on d7 was played, and now queen on b3, protecting now this d5 pawn. Here we have king on h8, getting out of this potential pins by the queen. Bishop on h3, very nice move, reposition of the bishop, because the bishop wasn't really active on this diagonal. It's blocked out by its own pawn here on d5. So here on h3, it creates at least some pinning ideas, and maybe we can try, if the knight in some occasions moves here from the square f5, then we can really play a very nice bishop outpost on e6, so this bishop would be really deadly on this e6 square. Rook from a to c8 was played. Here Stockfish maybe tries for simplifications with some potential c6 moves, but you see this knight on b6 is hanging, so that's why I liked more this blocking system with the move b6, because of course in some blocking positions maybe you can get use of your knights. If the position gets too static, then the knights are better in the continuation of the game. Here rook from a to b to a1 was played, and now you see we have now again occupied this very important a file, because that's the only file that's open. Here rook on b8 was played, and now rook on a3, with the idea of course to doubling up the rooks on the a file. Rook from f to d8 was played, and now bishop on b6. Very interesting move, because now we're creating also some weaknesses here on the queen side. Here after c takes b6 we have now 3 pawns that are really weak, but black can try in some occasions maybe a very powerful knight outpost on the square d4, because then this knight cannot be challenged by this light square bishop, of course, because this d4 square is on a dark square. You need many moves in order to challenge the knight, and basically you would be forced to give up your rook maybe for this powerful knight, but we'll come to that later. It will be really interesting middle game here. So rook on a4 was played by Leela C0, rook on f8, and now rook on c1, getting use of the c file. Queen on f7 was played, getting out finally of this annoying pin here by the bishop, so maybe trying then this knight on d4 outpost, and now bishop on g4 was played, improving also the position of the bishop, with some ideas maybe to play the move h4 and then h5. Really weaken this firm structure that black has built here around the knight. Rook from b to d8 was played, and now I think Stockfish could have gone here with this knight on d4. It's really, I think, an equal position now, although you're losing this pawn here on d6, but at least we could try some pawn breakthroughs here. And there are also some, if you try something like, I don't know, queen on a2, then here rook on d8 can be played. Maybe after h4 moves we can play queen on e8. Rook takes on d4, e takes d4 is still an interesting idea, but I still think you can hang on to this position. Although this bishop is a little bit out of game, this rook sacrifice is not so powerful in this position. But here, after knight from rook from b to d8 was played, now h4 with the preparation maybe to play the move h5. Now king on h7 was played, and now king on h1, king on h8, and here probably Stockfish is going for a draw, because the pieces are a little bit paralyzed here by black. King on g2 was played, and now rook on d7. Queen on a2 with the preparation maybe to play the rook here on a7, and then go for this weakness here on b7. Rook on d8 was played, rook on h1, queen on d7, and now king on h3. And now comes a very critical position. Here rook on c8 was played. You see these two top engines are testing a little bit each other. They are trying to find some gaps in the position. They are trying to force some mistakes by the opponent. Here rook on c4 was played, which is of course a very nice idea. We want to again maybe connect our pawns. Here we would have then no more these weaknesses on b5 and d5. Rook on a8 was played, rook on a4, now rook on c8, sort of repetition, but now rook on a7. Rook on b8, rook on b1, protecting this b5 pawn, queen on f7, and now rook on a4 again. And now we have very interesting move, rook from b to d8. And now king on h2. Again, you see the position is really near that we have a three times repetition here, so it would be a draw. Knight on d4 was played now, and here rook on c1. And here Stockfish makes sort of this decisive mistake, because maybe Stockfish could have gone again knight on f5 and try really to repeat the moves going into a draw. I don't think that, you see, it's easy also for white to make some progress. There are many weaknesses there are many weak pawns on the board, so if you lose the connection between your pieces, if you lose the defense of these pawns, you could get you lose this game. So that's why I think here Stockfish could have gone into repetition of moves. But here Stockfish plays rook on b8. And the most important thing about this move is that we have lost the defense of this d6 pawn. And here Leela C0 plays a very nice move. Rook takes on d4. So now finally comes this tactical idea to giving up the rook for the exchange. E takes d4 was played, and now f4. And here rook on a8 was played, trying to, maybe this was Stockfish calculations, that we can now occupy the a file and really get into the attack with these rooks on the second or first rank in order to attack the king here, which is a little bit weakened here because we have pushed many pawns here with this move g3, h4, f4. So we have also left some spaces in front of the king, so this could be dangerous. So probably Stockfish had some calculations here. And let's evaluate the position now before this move. Rook on 8. You see, you cannot push here g5 because these two pawns and this knight are really controlling this square very well. So you see, it would be very hard for Stockfish to open some files. So basically we can only play on the a file here. We can of course not play on the c file because the bishop is covering this c8 square. So that's why here really the a file is the only file that here Stockfish can make some progress. But this d6 pawn is really weak. It can be attacked by the queen, by the rook, even if the position allows it. So that's why these calculations by Stockfish, I think they were wrong here. After rook on a8, queen on b3, queen on e8, and now king on h3, improving the position of the king. Here the king is more secured because we don't have any more some threats of the check on the second rank. Here rook on a5 was played, and now rook on b1, queen on a8, and now you see knight on d6. This was a huge weakness in the position. Rook on a1, we have bishop on e6. As I mentioned, this is a very important square for the bishop. This bishop is controlling now very powerful diagonals. This rook is really out of game, so it's a better position of course for white, although down the exchange. So bishop on f6 was played with the idea maybe to play king on g7 to get some kind of space for the king, maybe to get some kind of activity with the bishop with the move bishop on e7. Here knight on e4 was played, and now we have created a very powerful pass pawn here on d6. h5 was played, d6, and now we have bishop on d8, king on g2, rook takes on b1, queen takes on b1, and now queen on a3. Black is trying desperately to come somehow into the game with the queen, with this rook, but this rook is really paralyzed. I'm feeling a little bit sorry for this rook on f8. It doesn't have any good squares. It cannot participate in the attack. It's basically a defensive piece, which is of course not good to have a rook in this function. So bishop on d5, we have king on g7, and now bishop takes on b7. We see another weak pawn, so it wasn't probably a good idea for Stockfish to defend this pawn. It was a weakness anyway. But you see again, this queen is alone in the attack. The queen doesn't have any supporters in the attack. Rook on f7 was played. We have again bishop on d5. Now this bishop comes also on another very active square. Rook on d7, and now queen on c2. And now Stockfish decides to give back the exchange, sacrifices the rook for the exchange, but Leela C0 probably said here, no, I'm taking this rook when I want. You're not deciding when I should take this rook. So here, simple queen on c4 was played. You see, queen on b2. Ideas are not so powerful because, as I said, here you don't have any more the supporters. With this queen, you can play one check, but after queen on h3, no more checks are possible. So again, this rook is hanging, and it's not making any progress here for black. So king on f8 was played, knight takes on d6 finally, because now the king is on a natural square. So here after queen on d6, there are also always these ideas to play bishop on g8 followed by queen on f7. So we have also here some checkmate threats. But you see, in this continuation, Stockfish loses another pawn, and we are 2 pawns up now. Still, we have opposite colored bishops, so it could be a draw if you play this endgame perfect. But you see now Leela C0's perfect endgame technique. Here, queen after queen on d4, bishop on f6 was played, queen on c4, again getting use of this very powerful diagonal. King on g7, you see we want to bring the king back into security. Queen on c6. This is a very interesting idea, because after queen takes on c6, of course we are not taking with the bishop, we are taking with the pawn, and then we will have another pass pawn, so supported with the king. Here we have a 3-on-2 situation, and we could also connect these 2 pass pawns on the c and d file, so this would be of course a completely winning endgame here for white. So that's why after queen on c6, bishop on e7 was played, and now queen on b7. This is a really tricky move. The important thing about this, that of course we have attacked this indirectly attacked this king, but here the idea is of course to play the move bishop on e4, and then after that maybe the move bishop on queen on c6, and then we would have a powerful attack on this g6 weakness. So this was sort of a Zugzwang move. We are now waiting black to do something, and here king on h6 was played. Now comes this move, bishop on e4, queen on e6, and you see now queen on c6. The queen is a little bit pinned to the defense of this g6 now. That's why queen on f6 was played. But Leela C0 is simply pushing more and more in this position, although it seems that Stockfish can hang on to a draw here. But Lela plays really this accurate endgame moves, not allowing Stockfish here any counterplay. Here d4 was played. You see, getting more space here. Of course, after queen takes on d4, you get checkmated on g6. So that's why d4, perfect move. But that was only possible because Leela C0 played very accurate, these tiny little moves, and really forced Stockfish to go back with the pieces. Now we have an unnatural position of the king again. The queen is simply stuck to the defense of this g6. Still, we cannot take because of the same idea, b takes c6, creating a pass pawn situation. That's why king on g7 was played. There are no good options here for black to continue. King on f3, you see, we are in an endgame now, so when we are in an endgame, you should play with your king. Queen on d6, now bishop on d3. We want to play now a different move order. We want to create now maybe this attack on with the queen on e4, and then try to push further this d4 pawn. Queen on f6, we have now king on e4. Very interesting move, because the king comes now also in the attack. You have to bring the king forward. Really great endgame play here by the queen on f5, of course, king on e3, queen on f6, and now king on f3. Again, we are playing sort of a Zugzwang moves. We are waiting black to do something, and now king on f7 was played. We have now again king on e4, queen on f5, king on e3, and now queen on f6. Now bishop on c4, king on g7, and now bishop on e6. This is also a very interesting move, because after bishop on d8, now king on e4, and now we have we've broke the king on a central square. Now the king is participating in the attack, and there are no queen on f5 checks anymore possible. So we have also pushed now even further this bishop out of the game. The bishop on d8 is really here blocked out by its own pawns. It cannot participate in any counter attack possibilities. Here queen on f8 was played, and now very nice move, queen on b7 with an attack, king on h6, and now queen on b8. Here queen on e7 was played, but now queen on e5. And of course the threat is to play d4, d5, and then after that d6. King on h7 was played, bishop on c4, and here queen on f8, bishop on d3, bishop on f6, but now queen on e6, and here king on g7, king on f3, we have queen on e7, and now Leela C0 wins another pawn. Queen on e1, probably Stockfish thought that here he can also try some perpetual checks, but you see now Leela C0's again, perfect endgame technique. Queen on b7 with a check, king on f8. Here we have queen on a8, king on f7. We have queen on d5 with a check, king on g7, queen on b7 again. We have king on f8, and now queen on e4. And this is now a very nice calculated endgame technique, because here after queen on h1 we have king on e2, pardon me, queen on h2 we have king on f3, queen on h1, king on f2, and here after queen on h2 we have now queen on g2, and there are no more checks possible. You can try here bishop takes on d4, but again in the next move you have to trade off the queens here with the pass pawn, with this 3 on 2 situation. It would be a completely losing endgame here for black, because we have also these targets here, the pawn on g6, and here also the pawn on h5. So that's why here queen takes on g2 was played, king takes on g2, and now king on f7 with the protection of this g6 pawn. But now here simple d5. These pawns are unstoppable for the dark square bishop, because the king is only stuck to the defense of these pawns. Bishop on e7 was played here, king on f3, bishop on f8, king on e4, bishop on d6, but now king on d4, king on e7, bishop takes on g6, bishop on b4, bishop takes on h5, king on d6, but now king on e4, king on d7, and it's now move 100, and in this position Stockfish resigned. So 100 perfect moves, as I said, by Leela C0. Great game, great endgame technique. You see, it's really a different chess that Leela C0 and these top engines are playing, because they're playing really first on this restriction of this opponent's possibilities in the game, which is really an interesting thing. I watched now many games by Leela C0 and Stockfish and other top engines. They're really playing first this restriction, and then maybe some attacking possibilities in the middle game. You see that Stockfish was really helpless, made this perpetual moves, repetition of moves, tried to get some draws chances, but Leela C0 simply didn't allow that and won the game very effectively in the endgame, I think. So, as I said, we're continuing to follow this TCEC Season 15 Super Final, because I think they're really great games to analyze, really to find some good ideas for some opening lines and some opening sidelines, which I think are really important. And meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games from the series with some other Leela C0 and Stockfish and many more games. And you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. And you can also subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.